Hello, my name is Benjamin Vidwen-Cloquet. I'm a partner at IBIS Capital and CEO and co-founder of ImpactX 2050. ImpactX 2050 is a global community of industry leaders, entrepreneurs, growth investors, and asset managers, all sharing the same goal: connecting capital and technology for impact. We focus on three industries: education, health, and food. Three industries currently transformed by unprecedented level of investment and innovation. Three industries that we believe will impact more than others the 2050 generation. Our community not only curates tech and investment trends globally in edtech, health tech, and food tech, but we also every week put the spotlight on impact-driven innovators and investors to listen to their impact stories. Profitable, sustainable, inclusive is how we define impact. What is your definition? Welcome to ImpactX 2050, and please join me to welcome our next guest.
Hi everyone, my name is Charlotte Barttelot. I currently live in London. I'm a principal at MMC Ventures, and I'm here to talk about health tech, or data-driven health as we call it at MMC Ventures.
Thanks so much for being here, Charlotte. We're very excited to have you on HealthTechX Stories. Firstly, for our audience, please would you just take one moment to introduce MMC Ventures and what you do?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Bracy. So MMC, we're an early stage venture capital fund based in London. We've been around for 25 years. So one of the kind of early funds in the industry. And we invest at the seed stage and Series A. And typically what we look for is kind of businesses that have a core IP differentiator at the core of kind of what they're doing. And we're pretty thematic in research and how we operate. So we spend a lot of time researching and thinking about the technology layer that's going to be changing the face of a number of different markets that we're interested in. And then we also cross-sect that with a couple of verticals that we spend a lot of time thinking about. So data-driven health, which I guess we're here to talk about today. That will be fintech as the other sort of one of the other verticals. We also have developer sort of cloud infrastructure and sort of data science within the enterprise. So that's kind of where we spend a lot of our time. The fund, we've got a number of different funds. We've got over sort of 80 portfolio businesses that we've invested in. So that's kind of, I guess, a little bit of an overview of the fund and kind of where we play in the space, I guess.
Thanks, Charlotte. And sounds like super interesting focus areas between digital health and fintech where you operate. And glad to hear you're taking a research-driven approach. Super exciting to hear that. And in terms of your career trajectory, is there a defining moment or maybe a defining person in your life that's brought you to where you are today professionally?
So I think the short answer is probably no. But I think there's a couple of points that I could probably talk about. So I grew up in quite an entrepreneurial family. My dad was an entrepreneur, so he set up a software business, which I worked in when I was younger. So I always actually presumed that I was going to go off and do the same thing. So I've always been interested in kind of I used to call myself as inventor when I was a little girl, I guess. So that kind of comes into a little bit. And then I guess the next kind of intersection, went to university, didn't really know what I wanted to do, but something I really enjoyed and was really interested at school was biology. So I studied biology at Edinburgh, and whilst I was never really interested in the wet lab sort of side of things, the bit that was very interesting was the theory how it impacted our day-to-day lives, particularly medical biology, which obviously it impacts all of us individually, and also how quickly the pace of change was within the industry. So I remember thinking quite actively when I was leaving, like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if you could kind of spin out some of these interesting science experiments into technology and companies that were actually going to potentially change the world, as opposed to just sitting within the lab. So that was kind of, I guess, something I can kind of point to. I went quite quickly into banking, and I was in banking for about 10 years, but in an entrepreneurial bank called Silicon Valley Bank. So again, was always kind of quite connected to the entrepreneurial side of things. There was more sort of software. I moved to venture capital about 4 years ago, and that was the opportunity I really took to say, okay, what do I want to really spend a lot of time on? And where can I potentially add value that maybe others sort of can't as much? So I picked up kind of the science there again and started thinking about actually maybe this should be a good area to focus. And that was about 3-4 years ago. So I kind of haven't really stopped since there. So that's I guess where I brought the passion back into kind of my sort of day-to-day work life, I guess.
It's so interesting to hear how the sort of scientific and biology mind met the entrepreneurial mind and has gotten you to where you are today. So that's great to hear. And you've mentioned in the first question around one of MMC's focus areas being data-driven health, as you describe it. When you look at that segment, what technological developments excite you the most as we look, let's say, the next 10 years of evolution in the healthcare space?
Yeah, so I mean, there's so many I could talk about, and I guess this is, there's so many different areas that fall within that. I guess if I was to pick two, I'd say one more on sort of the healthcare side that I'm quite excited by is, I truly believe that every part of kind of acute care will be done virtually over time. So, we saw obviously, it'll be no surprise, but during COVID, obviously telemedicine and the way we interact with our healthcare and also the attitudes of how we interact with our healthcare fundamentally changed, frankly, because the alternative was taken away. That has reverted back a little bit since, I guess, the world has opened up a little bit more, but I think those attitudes will remain. And I think that's only going one way. And I suppose what we've seen to date in this side, the likes of a telemedicine or, at-home diagnostic testing, for instance, that's still kind of getting started. But actually, that has started to improve kind of healthcare outcomes in terms of how people are engaging more with their healthcare. It's more convenient for people. But I still think there's a lot more we could be doing there. For instance, one of the big bottlenecks is if you're putting a therapist or a doctor in front of a video, you still need a therapist and doctor, and that's one of the bottlenecks that actually they're in short supply. And providing truly better access to healthcare for everyone requires more resources that can't purely be solved through those platforms. So I'm really interested in looking for those businesses that are using more technology at the core of that. And as I say, I believe that attitudes will truly change and that there needs to be a lot of infrastructure around the trust of those sort of systems. But over time, I think really we're only going to get those true efficiency gains and true better patient outcomes through more of that being more digital and people putting their trust more in technology over time. So that will be a journey, and I think that will probably take 10 years, but I think that is one of the bits I'm really excited about on the healthcare side. And then to pick up something, a different trend, which I guess is quite different and more on the sort of biology side, is synthetic biology, or R&D within drugs 2.0. We've seen a lot of businesses around kind of AI drug discovery space. There's a lot of good reasons for that. A couple of the reasons are, data has improved dramatically. Precision medicine is becoming more of a real thing because everybody can get their genome sequenced and the cost of that continues to come down. You've got exponential data growth. And also, I think the mindset change as well within the scientists. People are more open to using tools, which historically was very manual. So the likes, a lot of lab automation. So a combination of a couple of these trends, I think, is going to do a couple of really interesting things over the few years. Is, yes, AI and sort of drug discovery, I think, will continue. But I think also more the tooling and the sort of platforms that a lot of scientists themselves use are going to become more commonplace and more accepted, and there's going to be a big explosion. And we're already starting to see that within the bioinformatics space, taking massive amounts of data that are being generated from more sequencing and making sense of that in a way that couldn't be done manually before. So I'll stop there, but those are kind of two of the areas that we've been doing quite a lot of thinking about internally.
Thanks so much, Charlotte. And what I think is so interesting about what you've said is really you're looking at the sort of early stage upstream R&D processes right through to the new modes of delivery of healthcare to patients. And so right from the beginning to the end, it shows, how much development is happening in the healthcare space as a whole, and everything in between, I think, is being disrupted as well. So that's fantastic to hear. And so at IBIS Capital and at HealthTechX, we're keenly focused on impact. And impact, as we all know, has been a buzzword for quite some time. How do you think at MMC and personally about impact and the concept of doing well and doing good? And how do you put that into the context of reviewing investment opportunities at MMC?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's something we think about a lot. So the short answer for us both are really important. So in terms of a little bit of context around MMC, so we are a B Corp, and I think we're one of the first VCs to actually become a B Corp. There's a lot more now. So what that really means is everything that we do, we have to have kind of, impact, ESG measures and report on that as part of operations. So that's within our sort of overall business, our ops team, the way we report, everything in the sort of back end, as well as how we make investment decisions. So specifically on the investment decisions, every single time we look at a new investment opportunity, we have a framework that we look at from, social, environmental, governance sort of perspective, and try and kind of compare a lot of our companies. And then also, because a lot of the companies are early stage, they haven't necessarily thought about that. So we try and help them in terms of how do they develop their policies to ensure that they've got a good policies effectively going forward. Because as you rightly said, it's a big priority for a lot of different, for a lot of industry, and it's less of a tick box thing, and it's now, I guess, transitioning into more of the way we operate our business.
That's great to hear, and I think it's really interesting to understand how investors manage and help to manage that process for their portfolio companies, given that it's so specific really to the operating metrics of those portfolio companies themselves. And final question before we get to the rapid fire section. What do the next 5 years look like for you and for MMC?
Yeah, so I think, look, for us, I mean, it's always around our portfolio. So we're continuing to sort of find and work with the best entrepreneurs and build our sort of portfolio, as well as kind of then continuing to support them on their journey. As I say, so we're investing at a stage, so, we want them to be successful and get the next round of investors. So that's something we're always going to be very focused on doing. We're growing as a business as well. We're raising new funds, increasing the fund sizes that we already have. So again, just putting more focus on kind of growing the best portfolio that we can within the areas that we know really well. And on that, I think, continue to sort of bulk up our brand in terms of the market, in terms of the areas that we are interested in. One of our values is being embedded within the ecosystem. So from the research perspective, getting out there, putting more research into the market, into the spaces we're interested in, and just talking about it kind of with the ecosystem. So I think we want to be doing more of that. So, when great entrepreneurs think of data-driven health or, and even specific themes within that, will be kind of top on their calling list. And I think the other thing we're thinking quite hard about, again, in just terms of supporting our portfolio, is we have a platform team alongside the investors. So how are we building up that kind of function within our team to best support the sort of founders and entrepreneurs that we're backing, from talent, from operations, from like a whole bunch of things. So those are things that we actively think about, but we will still stay very dedicated, I think, to our sort of core areas, our core thesis, to make sure we're super focused, and the brand is very focused around that at that sort of seed Series A stage.
Thanks so much, Charlotte. And so the next couple of minutes will be a series of rapid fire either or questions. Okay. And so I'll go ahead and get started on that. So first, treatment or prevention?
Yeah, and what time period? So I think prevention has to be the future.
Growth or profit?
Growth as a venture investor.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Fiction.
Morning or night?
Morning.
And coffee or tea?
Ooh, that's hard. Tea.
Very good. Thank you so much, Charlotte. And as we close off our interview today, The last question we always ask is for you to nominate the next interviewee for a HealthTechX story.
Ooh, there's so many people I could say. I'm going to go with another one of our great portfolio companies, Tommy at Zund. So Zund is a seed investment we did earlier this year alongside MMC Ventures. And this has played into some of the work we're doing around kind of the infrastructure within the healthcare ecosystem. And what they've actually built and they're continuing to develop is an AI symptom tracker and health checker, which is clinically regulated to give the same sort of recommendations as technically a doctor. And it's medically regulated, the product itself, but as part of the infrastructure of somebody else's product. So that could be an insurer, for instance, who is trying to get more information for, pricing new health insurance, for instance, or a better customer experience of claims, but getting information around symptoms and health, the health of that person. Or that could be a provider who's looking to do better clinically relevant triage, for instance.
That's super interesting. And thank you so much for being here today, Charlotte. It's been great to host you on HealthTechX Stories, and we hope to speak to you again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bracy.